Travis Wayne Goodsell. I just checked my comments, and Joe, why did you put 3 of the same comment on the same video? But another woman, and I think I know her, or it's a very popular Mormon name, Jen. Did I not do the... I did. Why are you on a different page? Jen McPherson. She says that there is nothing about the video that I posted that is anti-Semitic. And the video was, warning, all caps, 3 exclamation points, LDS Church Prophet Anti-Semitic Hate Speech Alert. So, Jen McPherson is an indoctrinated Mormon zombie who doesn't understand what being anti-Semitic is. And that's common. You know, you see it with when the certain group came out with critical race theory. All the white evangelical Christian haters were in an outroar, and now are pulling books from the bookshelves and rewriting history to falsely teach our children now, when they're the same parents who did not like science being taught to their kids in the school system because it teaches against religion. Beam and moat. Beam and moat. And so, yeah, it's time for a history lesson. The Jews are referred to as Semitic because of the Roman period author who was writing prophecy of the future for the latter days, a book of Revelation, said that the Jews came from Ur of Babylon, which is an anachronism in and of itself, if it's literal history, because Ur of Babylon did not exist until after the Babylonian captivity. Well, the Babylonian captivity, because Babylon originated from Ur as their capital when they formed, and then rose up and took over Assyria. And it was right before 600, and so you got to think BC terms, so it's closer to 700 BCE, more so to 600, but it's heading towards 700. It's a little complicated, especially when you're talking about which century it's in. We're talking about the 7th century, even though it's in the 600s. Very confusing. And then there's no 0 year. What's up with that? My Urim and Thummim, however, includes a 0 year. So when I do 1 BC, it's 0. And so if I go further into the BCs, I got to remember that I have to counter for the 0 year that they put in there in their programming. So Babylon is in the land designated by this author as the inheritance for Shem, the son of Noah. And so that's Shemitic. SSH is the same Assyrian, Babylonian, Mesopotamian letter. And so it depends on when and who is speaking it as to how it's pronounced. And so understand that it's the same linear character being written here. Shem and Sem. And it means name in translation. And so Samuel, name of God. And so this is their captivity name. But because of the author, he says, well, you came from Babylon. Babylon was just taking you hostage back to your city. No, it didn't exist. Can't happen that way. Especially with the hundreds of years that have gone by, if you trust the math of the ages of the characters. Not correct. And so, that's where that comes from. And unfortunately, that's not who the Jews are. The Jews are technically Egyptian. When you weed out the Babylonian influencing, you realize that it's directly from the Egyptian documents. That the author assembled the various stories in Egyptian and threw them all together into a narrative timeline. And so that's why you have the creation, which comes from the Heliopolis creation glyph in the Genesis chapter 1. And then you have another story pre-Heliopolis creation glyph with the creation of Nut and Geb, because the Heliopolis creation glyph is about Nut and Geb having their 5 kids. And so they're not putting them in the right order. And then you have the Ogdod story, which is Noah and the flood. And so, yeah, you have people who incorrectly think that it's Babylonian influenced and says that it's the Epic of Gilgamesh. And no, that's the influencing of the 7 pairs. That's where the Babylonian influence is. The original is just the 2 pairs. And so remove the 7 pairs, and then you got to figure it out. Remove the 7th day, and then you got to figure it out. But that gets rid of the Sabbath. Exactly. The pre-captivity Jews were Egyptian. They didn't have the Babylonian created 7th day week. 7th day in a week. 7 days week. However that's supposed to be worded. And so, anti, therefore, means you're not just against, but usually connotates hate and violence towards. And so, Constantine, Roman Emperor Constantine, 325 CE. So these Semitic Jews of captivity, have been around for 900 years, as they've forgotten and betrayed their origins from Egyptian. But nonetheless, that's so that you can distinguish the dates in history. 900 years pass from the Babylonian captivity when Roman Emperor Constantine created the organization and the religion called Christianity. And he didn't create it with his own scriptures and his own separate distinct Christ. No, he replaced the Jews. He replaced the Jewish religion. He replaced the Jewish scripture. He replaced the Jewish Christ. That is a vicious, hate-filled attack on the Jews to replace them. Because are you familiar with what Christian anti-Semites chant? Jews will not replace us. You already replaced them. And it's been replaced for 1,700 years. This is how hate-filled anti-Semites are. That they go into historical denialism, refusing to acknowledge and recognize the Jews and their history and what happened to them during their being chased all over Europe, and lest we forget, the Holocaust. And so, by Christianity replacing the Jews in all things, the Christian culturally appropriated and replacing the Jews' scriptures, now called the Gospels, rather than the Apocalypse of Matthew, the Apocalypse of Mark, the Apocalypse of Luke, and the second Apocalypse of John, because he already has one, Book of Revelation. And thus turning Jesus into a real person. Because have you not identified what Matthew is telling you? Matthew is telling you, yeah, I know the prophecy is supposed to be Emmanuel. I am calling him Jesus in this story. It's the prophecy of the Jews for the latter day Christ during the apocalypse. It comes from Deuteronomy 18, 15 through 19. And if you're unfamiliar with that, you've not followed the footnotes that Joseph Smith clearly outlined for you in verse 40 of his second vision, which this year is the bicentennial year of. That's who our Mormon Christ is. We're getting to that. And so Christians are in denial. As I got an email from a hidden subscriber who unsubscribed after she asked me what my feelings were about the Jews or Christians usurping the Jews. If she had watched my channel, she would have known this information. And it's almost like she purposely did this to be mean, knowing what I already would tell her, and then I actually do it? How dare I? And so she's blocked me from emailing her. If you don't want me emailing you, don't email me. Dumb girl. And so she could not understand, as a half Christian, half Jew, how she was anti-Semitic too. Because she's Jew. How could she be anti-Semitic? Not all Christians are anti-Semitic. Yes. You have allowed your Christian side to replace your Jewish side. You have changed the Jewish side to be accepting of your Christian side that replaced the Jewish side. You are anti-Semitic. You can't replace the Jews. You have to give them their religious freedom. Give them back their scriptures. Give them back their Christ. It's not yours. Come up with your own religion. Don't replace the Jews. See, Islam came up with their own religion. But they're anti-Semitic too, as they had this hatred for the Jews. And why? Because in the Jewish scriptures, Genesis, they're the chosen ones. Ishmael was rejected and kicked out of the family by Sarai. It was before the new name, I guess, so. Well, no, maybe. I don't know, I'd have to go back and check when she got the new name. And so Islam says they're from Ishmael, and that they're the chosen ones, because they're the birthright blessing son. And that their birthright and blessing was wrongfully usurped by Yitzhak, mocking laughter. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. What, did you thought the European corrupted English was the correct pronunciation? It is for the temple and new names. But, yeah, any time where you hate and exhibit your hate, practice your hate, which means replacing the Jews, is a practice of hate against the Jews. You are anti-Semitic. This is a violent, hate-filled wrath to replace the Jews, their religion, their scripture, their Christ. And to just say, nope, he's not Emmanuel anymore, he's Jesus. Because Matthew makes it very clear, he's supposed to be Emmanuel. But he calls him Jesus. Why Jesus? Well, if you knew your scriptures, you'd know that it came from Jeremiah chapter 23. Because there he expands on the prophecy of the Jewish Christ. Deuteronomy 18:15 through 19. The man like Moses. Because in the latter days, they're not going to be talking about Moses. Oh, it's the man like Moses. And wouldn't you know it, Joseph Smith talks about that too. 103:16. He's Mormon. And so, yes, every time Christians gather, every time Christians demand our government have Jesus in the schools, Jesus in government, they are being anti-Semitic, not just hateful in and of themselves, hateful of the government, hateful of other religions. But every time a Christian declares that Jesus is the Christ, Jesus is Lord, they are spitting on the Jews because Jesus replaced Emmanuel. Starting to make sense? Because it's the Mormons' turn. Do I need to read from the Book of Mormon? Have you not read it? There's no footnote there. Isn't that interesting? They'll instead, in the manuals, talk about the language of the Egyptians. But they won't touch the learning of the Jews. John Welsh did. Didn't you, John? Yeah, it's sad. When a son thinks his father is a hero, only he is unaware that his father is a fraud and exposed the church. The late war is where all that Jewish chiasmus comes from. And there's, I think it's a WordPress site. War versus the Book of Mormon. And Wordtree. Wordtree.org. He does an excellent job of doing a side-to-side comparison. And so, wordtree.org/the-late-war/. Except he doesn't code it. You're supposed to have a key code for the colors. Instead, we have to figure it out. So the late war, for example, location 26-1. the 4th day of the 7th month, which is the birthday of Columbian liberty and independence. From the Book of Mormon, Alma, chapter 10, verse 6. The 4th day of the 7th month, which is in the 10th year of the reign of the judges. Then there's more detailed stuff. In 27 to 28 of the late war, near Moravian town, and it came to pass the army were under a chief warrior whom they called Tecumseh, smote their chief warrior, Tecumseh, and slew him, he fell to the earth. Alma 50, 33, 35, Alma 62, 36, and 37. People of Morianton, and it came to pass the army was led by a man whose name was Teancum. They did pursue Teancum and slew him. He was dead and had gone the way of all the earth. I had to shut the windows because we had hail and now snow. So I need to get that window up again. I've not gone running enough to clear out my lungs or my esophagus. And so it's not technically plagiarism, ex-Mormons. But you can see that the late war was an influence. Now, Solomon Spaulding's manuscript found, yes, it was the template for the whole thing. But still, you need to know the difference between plagiarism and putting it in your own words. This shows that the Book of Mormon put the late war in their own words, not actually plagiarized. But yeah, there's a lot of coincidences, and there's a reason why. It's because they're referring you to the late war, because that's the school textbook. And so everybody knows about the late war. So when they read in the Book of Mormon, oh, this sounds a lot like the late war. And what is the Book of Mormon about? It's the learning of the Jews' manner of prophesying, book of Revelation for the latter days, the Armageddon late war. And y'all miss it because you're stuck on, no, it's literal history, it's real, versus it's plagiarism, it's fake. No, they're encoding a message for you, a warning about the great and abominable church that'll be named after Jesus, the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and you missed it. I never even watched that video, and already there are 42 views in the 20 hours. I just did it because I wanted to use my bra and panties for something. But yeah, the guy is a creep. 40 years old. What are you doing in the girls' dorms? Get out of there. Stealing their clothes. What an ass. But anyway. And so Joseph Smith is Jewish. Book of Mormon is Jewish. So what did Brigham Young do? He replaced the Jewishness of Joseph Smith in the Book of Mormon. That is an anti-Semitic move. And he'd been doing it ever since he became an apostle. He first went out on missions and converted what was called the Danites. They were the ones who were upset with Joseph Smith Sr. for having stopped their attempt to silence William Morgan. Helped him flee the country, despite the scandals that were involved. The death of Thomas Monroe. But nonetheless, they wanted revenge. And when Heber C. Kimball found out who it was who was responsible, he put it in his journal later on in life. We have it in the Wikipedia page under Masonry. And everybody misses it. Nobody makes the connections because you're not following my instructions on how to study church history. You have a file or a page on people, places, events, and dates. If you had done this, church historians or other historians critical of the church, you would have made this connection, like I did. And so, after having converted the Danites, they too became missionaries and were going around converting people to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. About Jesus. Book of Mormon is another testament of Jesus Christ. They were replacing the Book of Mormon and Joseph's religion in real time. They didn't wait until after he died. And there was a purpose in Brigham Young's evil madness. Because after telling everybody it's the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, as they're still in Europe or in other places in the United States, when they had Brigham or Joseph Smith murdered, Brigham Young now takes over and says, hey, we're going west. We're the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So all these converts, that's the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I guess we go with Brigham. And now you see the con he pulled. This was anti-Semitic. It was anti-Mormon. Anti-Jewish Mormon. And so, yes, Mormons accuse me of being anti-Mormon. They accuse ex-Mormons of being anti-Mormon. They accuse critics who don't have any affiliation to the church. Anti-Mormon. Can't touch us, can't criticize us, can't complain, can't question, can't ask questions. Anti-Mormon, Korahor, Satan. Just like the white supremacists. Jews will not replace us. Joseph Smith will not replace you. Because that's what you chant every time a Mormon says, I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I know Jesus lives. You are an anti-Joseph Smith Mormon. You are an anti-Semitic, anti-Mormon Semitic. You don't get to claim that your church is unique and distinct. Brigham Young usurped it from Joseph and replaced it, just like Constantine did to the Jews. This is not a distinct religion. Did the change still remain on Wikipedia for Brigham Young? My videos got that changed. Brigham Young is the first president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Oh, I see in the text here that it wasn't. It says he's the second. Did they change it back? Those bastards. This is an anti-Semitic move. Yeah, they changed it back. He's now the second president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. I made sure to get a picture made of the change, and now they changed it back. You Mormon hate-filled bastards. He is the first. Leave the history alone. Mormons keep trying to change the history to justify what Brigham did. And so we're going to label this 2023. So yeah, my exposing that it had been changed because I exposed that it was wrong has now been changed back. God, bastards. And so yes, Mormons by their very existence, by Nelson demanding the name with Jesus. And everybody knows Joseph Smith talked about Amen. Emmanuel. God Amen. And so you have no clue, Mormons, that you hate your latter-day Christ. Do you understand this? By denouncing Joseph Smith and his religion and his scriptures and his Christ, replacing them with Christianity and Jesus, your Christ is among you. And what are you doing to him? He's real. He's here. It's the latter days. And Joseph begged you, as he made it very suspiciously obvious with his clues, and you missed it because you replaced it. You turned it into literal history. These were prophecies. He quoted also the 3rd chapter of Acts, 22nd and 23rd verses, precisely as they stand in our New Testament. He said that that prophet was Christ. But the day had not yet come when Mormons who would not hear his voice should be cut off from among the people, but soon would come. Do you not see the danger you are in? White supremacy is awful, abominable, as Joseph Smith calls it. Christianity with Jesus is an abomination because they're anti-Semitic. Verse 19. All of you who've been on missions know this, but you miss it because you've replaced it with Jesus and Christianity. That very abomination it talks about. And so Jen McPherson, who just says, I don't see anything, there's nothing here, denialism, alter history, replace the Jews, not anti-Semitic for replacing the Jews. I don't hate the Jews. Jesus is going to come back and convert them to the true church anyway. He's going to destroy the wicked and take over the governments. Are you listening to yourself? Because the day that shall burn as an oven is these anti-Semitics going to cause another Holocaust.